don't sit with a poor, useless kid.
Enjoy your dinner, Dad, because tomorrow you'll discover who really owns this house.
The moment my father pushed my chair away and called me a poor, useless kid, everyone at the table laughed. What they did not know was that the house, the company, and the money paying for their dinner were already tied to my name. Hello, my name is Ethan Cole. I am 32 years old, and this is the story of the night my family finally learned the difference between looking poor and being powerless. I grew up in Ashford, Connecticut, in a family that cared about appearances more than truth. My father, Richard Cole, owned Cole Development Group, a regional construction company that built shopping centers, office parks, and expensive homes across New England. In Ashford, his name opened doors. People shook his hand at charity dinners. Bank managers returned his calls before lunch. Local politicians smiled whenever he entered a room. At home, however, Richard Cole measured everyone by what they could do for him. My older brother, Marcus, was his favorite. Marcus wore tailored suits, drove a silver Porsche, and had the title of executive vice president, although he could barely read a financial statement. My younger sister, Vanessa, had never held a real job, but she had thousands of social media followers and a talent for making expensive vacations look like business trips. Then there was me. I wore plain clothes. I drove a 10-year-old Honda. I rented a small apartment above a bakery. For the previous 3 years, I had told my family that I worked as an independent data consultant. That was true, but it was not the whole truth. When my mother, Helen, invited me to my father's 65th birthday dinner, I almost refused. Something in her voice stopped me. "Please come, Ethan," she whispered. "There are things you don't understand." I asked what she meant, but my father shouted her name in the background. The call ended immediately. So on a cold Saturday evening in November, I drove to the house where I had grown up. The mansion stood on a hill behind iron gates, the glowing under rows of white lights. Valets moved luxury cars along the circular driveway. Through the tall windows, I saw relatives, business partners, and family friends drinking champagne beneath crystal chandeliers. I arrived carrying a small wrapped box. Inside was my grandfather's old brass compass, restored by hand. My grandfather had built the first version of Cole Development from one truck and a rented garage. Before he died, he told me that a person without direction could own the whole world and still be lost. I thought my father might remember those words. I was wrong. The dining room was filled with nearly 30 guests. My father sat at the head of a long walnut table. Marcus sat on his right, Vanessa on his left. My mother had been placed near the far end, almost like a guest. One empty chair remained beside her. I crossed the room, greeted everyone, and started to sit. Before I could touch the seat, my father stood, grabbed the back of the chair, and pulled it away. The legs scraped loudly across the floor. The entire room became quiet. My father did not even look at me. He adjusted his cufflink and said, "I don't sit with a poor, useless kid." Marcus laughed first. Vanessa covered her mouth, but I saw her smiling. A few guests looked embarrassed. Others stared down at their plates, because wealthy people are often very skilled at pretending cruelty is invisible. My mother whispered, "Richard, please." He raised one finger and silenced her. "This dinner is for people who built something," he continued. "Not for a grown man who still rents a room over a bakery." I looked around the table. The candles reflected in expensive glasses. In front of my father sat a bottle of wine worth more than my car. Behind him hung a large oil painting of my grandfather. For 1 second, anger burned through me. Then I noticed something that turned my anger into suspicion. My mother had a dark bruise around her wrist. She quickly pulled her sleeve over it. I did not argue. I set the wrapped compass beside my father's plate. "Happy birthday," I said. "Enjoy the house while you still can." Marcus leaned back. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means dessert may come with paperwork." Then I walked out. I had reached the front door when my mother followed me into the hallway. Her face was pale. "Ethan, wait." I turned and looked at her wrist. "Did he do that?" She shook her head too quickly. "Mum," her eyes filled with tears. Instead of answering, she pushed a small brass key into my palm. "Your grandfather's storage unit," she whispered. "Number 314 at Ashford Self-Storage. Go tonight, before your father realizes the key is missing." "What's inside?" Footsteps sounded in the dining room. My mother stepped back. "The reason he has hated you since you turned 18. Before I could ask another question, she returned to the party. I drove straight to the storage facility. Unit 314 was at the end of a cold concrete hallway. The lock opened with the brass key. Inside, under a canvas sheet, I found an old metal filing cabinet, a wooden desk, and 12 sealed boxes. Every box carried my grandfather's handwriting. The first contained property deeds. The second held company ledgers from 20 years earlier. The third was full of letters addressed to me. My hands shook as I opened the first envelope. "Ethan, if you are reading this, Your father has either told you the truth too late or hidden it too long. My grandfather explained that he had never trusted my father's hunger for status. Before his death, he created the Cole Family Stewardship Trust. 40% of the original company shares, the family mansion, and several commercial properties had been placed inside it. I was named the future controlling trustee, but only after my 32nd birthday. Until then, my father could manage the assets, but he could not sell them, borrow against them for personal use, or transfer them to Marcus. I had turned 32 6 weeks earlier. According to the documents, control had legally passed to me. But that was only the first shock. Inside another box, I found recent loan agreements signed by my father. He had used trust properties as security for more than $16 million in debt. Some signatures looked like mine. They were not mine. My father had forged them. Then I found a red folder labeled EC. Inside were copies of letters supposedly sent to me over the years, notices about the trust, invitations to meetings, and annual financial reports. Every letter had been returned with the words, "Recipient refused." I had never seen any of them. Someone had made sure I remained ignorant. At the bottom of the folder was a handwritten note from my grandfather's attorney, Samuel Price. If Richard prevents Ethan from receiving these documents, contact Rebecca Lynn at Northstar Fiduciary Services. I knew Rebecca Lynn very well. She was my business partner. 3 years earlier, Rebecca and I had founded Northstar Analytics, a financial risk company that used software to identify fraud in property portfolios. My family believed I was a struggling freelancer because I deliberately kept my name out of the press. In reality, Northstar had grown into a national firm. A private investment group had recently offered $72 million to buy a controlling stake. I had refused. Rebecca answered my call on the second ring. "Ethan, it's nearly midnight. Do you know a Samuel Price?" There was a long silence. "Where are you?" she asked. "My grandfather's storage unit. Don't touch anything else. Photograph the room, lock it, and leave. I am calling Samuel now." "You knew about the trust." "I knew there was a protected family structure. I did not know you were the beneficiary. Samuel hired Northstar months ago to examine irregularities connected to coal development. He protected your identity from our audit team." The room suddenly felt smaller. "How bad is it?" I asked. "Bad enough that your father's company could collapse by Monday." That was the second time the ground moved beneath me that night. At 9 the next morning, I met Rebecca and Samuel Price at Northstar's office in Hartford. Samuel was 78, thin and sharp-eyed. He placed a recording device on the conference table and apologized before saying anything else. "Your grandfather ordered me to tell you the truth on your 32nd birthday," he said. "I sent the notice. Your father intercepted it. When I tried to reach you directly, he threatened to accuse me of mishandling the estate. I should have fought harder. I wanted to blame him, but there was no time." Rebecca projected the company records onto a screen. The numbers told a brutal story. My father and Marcus had created fake subcontractors, approved inflated invoices, and moved money into private accounts. Vanessa's brand company had received almost $900,000 for marketing services that had never been delivered. Worse, coal development was weeks away from missing its debt payments. "They are planning to sell the Riverside property," Rebecca said. "That land belonged to the trust. It was also the most valuable undeveloped property in Ashford." "Can they sell it?" I asked. "Not legally. But they have scheduled a closing for Monday morning, using your forged authorization." Samuel pushed a document toward me. "As controlling trustee, you can freeze the transaction. You can also remove Richard as manager immediately." I picked up the pen, but then my phone vibrated. It was a message from my mother. "PAs.com, Hamayor Fatir Kanadus Tichi Phyllis are gone." Before I could reply, she sent a photograph. My childhood bedroom had been torn apart. The mattress had been cut open. Drawers lay broken on the floor. Then another message appeared. "Hey Tykes, I help PDOU. I'm Sarwai." I called her. No answer. I called again. Her phone was turned off. The investigation was no longer only about stolen money. My mother was in danger. Rebecca contacted a former federal investigator named Daniel Ortiz, who now led Northstar's security team. Daniel and I drove to the mansion while Samuel prepared emergency filings. When we arrived, the gates were locked. My father refused to let us enter. Through an upstairs window, I saw my mother standing behind a curtain. She raised one hand for half a second, then disappeared. Daniel told me not to force my way inside. "If she is being held, we call the police," he said. "If she chooses to stay, we need proof before we can remove her." Then he pointed toward the garage. A black company SUV was pulling away from a side entrance. We followed it to an old coal development warehouse outside town. Marcus got out, carrying 2 boxes from the storage unit. My father must have discovered that some records were missing and sent him to hide whatever evidence he could find at the house. We did not confront him. Daniel photographed Marcus entering the warehouse and called the attorney. Samuel obtained an emergency preservation order that afternoon. By sunset, county officers had secured the building. Inside, they found shredded contracts, fake invoices, and a laptop containing 2 sets of company books. They also found something none of us expected, a draft agreement showing that my father planned to transfer the remaining company assets to a new corporation owned entirely by Marcus. After the transfer, Cole Development would declare bankruptcy, leaving employees, lenders, and the trust to absorb the losses. My father had not invited me to dinner to celebrate his birthday. He had invited me because he needed my signature. The humiliation at the table was part of the plan. He wanted to make me angry, then offer me $50,000 to sign a family separation agreement and disappear forever. Hidden inside that agreement was approval for the Riverside sale and a release of all my trust rights. But when he saw that I had brought only a small gift and wore an old jacket, he decided I was too weak to matter. His pride had ruined his own trap. On Monday morning, my father arrived at Ashford National Bank for the Riverside closing. Marcus, Vanessa, 2 lawyers, and the buyer were with him. They expected to sign a $40 million deal. Instead, they found me sitting at the head of the conference table. I wore the same inexpensive jacket from the birthday dinner. Rebecca sat beside me. Samuel was on my other side. 3 bank officers stood near the windows, and Daniel waited by the door. My father stopped walking. "What is he doing here?" he demanded. The bank president cleared his throat. "Mr. Cole, Ethan is the controlling trustee and beneficial owner of the property. The closing cannot proceed without his authorization." My father's face lost its color. Marcus laughed nervously. "That's impossible." Samuel placed the trust documents on the table. It became effective on Ethan's 32nd birthday. Vanessa stared at me as if I had changed shape. My father recovered quickly. He had built a career by turning fear into anger. "This boy has no idea how to run a company," he said. "He cannot even afford a proper car." Rebecca opened a presentation on the screen. The North Star logo appeared, followed by our national client list and valuation. "Ethan founded North Star Analytics," she said. "His personal equity is worth considerably more than the debts currently threatening Cole Development." Silence filled the room. I looked at my father. "You were right about one thing. I am not rich because of your company." His jaw tightened. I became successful despite it. I slid 3 documents across the table. The first removed him as manager of the trust. The second froze all trust assets. The third referred the forged signatures and fraudulent transfers to state and federal investigators. Marcus stepped forward. Daniel blocked him. "You can't do this to your family," Marcus said. "You were willing to bankrupt hundreds of employees to protect your Porsche." Vanessa began to cry. "I didn't understand the payments. Dad handled everything." "You signed the invoices." "He told me it was legal." "Then you can explain that under oath." My father did not beg. He leaned over the table and spoke quietly. "If you destroy me, your mother loses everything." That was when the conference room door opened. My mother walked in. The bruise on her wrist was uncovered. She carried a thick, blue binder. My father stared at her. "Helen, go home." But for the first time in my life, she did not obey him. "No, Richard," she said. "I am done living in a house where silence is the price of safety." She placed the binder in front of Samuel. For 11 years, my mother had secretly copied bank statements, threatening messages, and records of my father's illegal transactions. She had hidden them because she feared what he would do to her and to me. The bruise came from the previous week, when she refused to sign a statement claiming I was mentally unfit to control the trust. My father pointed at her with a shaking hand. "You ungrateful." "Careful," Daniel said. "The room is being recorded." That ended the meeting. The consequences did not arrive all at once. Real justice rarely does. The bank canceled the sale. Investigators seized the warehouse laptop and froze several private accounts. My father was charged with fraud, forgery, and financial crimes. Marcus was charged for his role in the fake subcontractor scheme. Vanessa avoided prison by cooperating, returning the money she could, and admitting what she had signed. My father tried to control the story. He told friends that I was a jealous son stealing a company I had never helped build. For a few days, some people believed him. Then the audit became public. The same people who had laughed at his jokes stopped returning his calls. The charity boards removed his name. The politicians who once shook his hand suddenly could not remember meeting him. But I did not take revenge by destroying the company. That would have hurt innocent employees. Instead, I used part of my North Star holdings to stabilize Cole Development. I sold the private jet, Marcus's company car, and the vacation property my father had purchased with stolen funds. We paid overdue contractors and protected employee pensions. Then I turned the company into an employee participation business, giving long-serving workers a share of future profits. I also changed its name. The sign outside headquarters no longer says Cole Development Group. It says Compass Community Builders, in honor of my grandfather and the gift my father never opened. My mother filed for divorce and moved into a comfortable house near the coast. Recovery was slow for her. Freedom can feel frightening when someone has trained you to fear every independent choice. But month by month, she became more like the woman I remembered from childhood. She started painting again. She traveled with friends. She stopped apologizing before expressing an opinion. As for the mansion, the trust allowed me to keep it. I sold it instead. Part of the money funded a shelter and legal aid program for people escaping financial and domestic abuse. The dining room table was donated to a community center. I asked them to make sure there was always an extra chair for anyone who needed a meal. 8 months after the birthday dinner, I visited my father while he waited for trial. We sat across from each other in a gray room divided by thick glass. He looked smaller without the mansion, the suits, and the people who had depended on his approval. He picked up the phone. "Have you come to enjoy this?" he asked. "No." "Then why are you here?" I held up my grandfather's brass compass. The wrapping paper had been removed after investigators searched the house. My father had never opened the box himself. "I came to give you your birthday present." He looked at the compass, and then at me. "You think you won?" "This was never about winning. You took everything from me." I shook my head. "No. I stopped you from taking everything from everyone else." For a moment, I saw anger in his eyes. Then the anger faded, and there was only emptiness. "I made you strong," he said. "You tried to make me feel worthless. Strength was what I built after I stopped believing you." I left the compass with the guard and walked away. 1 year later, Compass Community Builders completed its first affordable housing project on part of the riverside land my father had tried to sell. At the opening ceremony, workers, families, and local officials gathered beneath a clear spring sky. My mother stood beside me, smiling. Near the entrance was a small bronze plaque with my grandfather's favorite words: "A person's value is not measured by what sits in the bank, but by who still has a seat at the table." I thought about the chair scraping across the floor that night. I remembered the laughter, the shame, and my father's refusal to look at me. For years, I had believed that revenge making him feel as small as he had made me feel. I was wrong. The best revenge was not becoming cruel enough to resemble him. It was building something honest from everything he tried to break. My father pushed away my chair because he thought I brought nothing to his table. In the end, I built a longer table and made sure there was no place left for his cruelty.